Hi, and welcome once again to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is September 22nd, and please turn to page 59. And today we're going to talk about ways of collecting information about you that you don't necessarily give actively.
Yeah, this is something that you have on you at all times. This is one of the things that I imagine people from the past would have imagined in a science fiction novel as a way that people in the future will communicate with devices or use security. And of course, today we're talking about
the rise of biometrics. And in the past, it may have been the stuff of science fiction, but now it's just an everyday reality.
So one of my first memories of biometrics it had to be a James Bond movie or like an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie where you need to scan your face or your fingerprints on the door. And so like Arnold kills the guy and puts his face against the door.
Yeah.
And it's like how even back then we can recognize that these biometrics could be easily thwarted by people with very nefarious means.
And that is probably true about all kinds of technologies. As soon as you invent the technology, somebody's going to invent a way around it.
Yeah, I suppose that as you're building them, you might imagine how your own technology might be broken because as you're building them, you must understand the certain flaws, and those could be exploited. Now, either you could hide them really well, or someone really clever and close to you may find ways to circumvent.
Okay, so let's jump into our article, The Rise of Biometrics. As technology becomes increasingly ingrained in our daily lives, new forms continue to emerge all the time. One novel example that you might have heard about is biometrics. This technology is defined as a means of identifying and authenticating a person using biological characteristics. Common biometric types include fingerprint mapping, facial recognition, and retina scans. Biometrics can be used to either authenticate a person's identity or identify individuals. Biometric authentication involves comparing a person's data with their previously stored information. In contrast, biometric identification involves comparing a person's data to that of others in a database to determine their identity.
Biometrics can be classified into two categories: physiological measurements and behavioral measurements. Physiological measurements can be further divided into two sets. Morphological identifiers refer to physical characteristics unique to an individual and that are unlikely to change, including fingerprints and eyes. For a biological analysis, DNA, blood, or urine samples are used. Contrary to physiological measurements, behavioral measurements look at a person's actions, such as how they talk, walk, and even sign their name.
While biometrics might seem like a new cutting-edge technology, it has actually been used for over 100 years. Around the turn of the 20th century, police forces in cities like London and Paris began using fingerprints to identify criminals. Law enforcement remains one of the most common fields where biometrics is employed. This includes using advanced technology like automatic biometric identification systems that can find criminals based on photos. Biometrics has also become widely used for immigration and border control. Many airports now have passengers scan their faces and fingertips upon entry and exit. While advancements in biometrics can be helpful, there are still concerns. Not all biometric tests are 100% accurate, and some facial recognition programs have been known to misidentify people of color more frequently. Hopefully, as this technology further develops, it will be used in ways that prioritize beneficial applications for society. Man, that's dense.
Today is a challenging article. This is one you'll want to slow down and read a couple times. On my own copy here, I have several boxes. I have parentheses. I have extra commas and arrows to help break up these phrases that are a little more challenging.
And I have intonation markings.
Yes, you do.
So that's called markup. Markup is M-A-R-K-U-P. That's one word, M-A-R-K-U-P. That means if you are going to read something aloud, especially in public or for recording, Very often, you will make marks where you need to pause or where the words need to rise in pitch and so forth and so on. If you do markup before you read, you can probably make fewer mistakes and you will read it a little more realistically, a little more that makes it easier for the listener to understand.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, you've probably already done this while you were in school, while you were learning, drawing marks over the place
stress
where you
syllables.
want to stress syllables.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. This is very similar to that, just at a more native level for when you need to read out loud, and it can be challenging.
That's right. So you don't read it like this. As technology becomes increasingly ingrained in our daily lives.
You sound like one of my students.
It's not just one of your students. It's in general in Taiwan. And so that is why I developed a way of teaching phrasing. That's where you pause when you read. And the continuation rise. So listen for the continuation rise when I read this sentence. As technology becomes increasingly ingrained in our daily lives, when I tell my students about it, they look at me with utter shock. They never, ever noticed it. But if you are at a place where you should pause and you haven't finished the sentence, this is what you need to do. You go high, you go low, and rise a little bit. Ingrained in our daily lives. I sound drunk because I'm doing it slowly. It happens so fast that you probably don't notice when people are reading or just speaking. Every time we speak, we use it all the time. So pointing it out will help you improve your reading because you will pay attention to where we need to pause. This gives a signal to the other person, especially a native speaker, that this phrase is finished. So process it in your brain. Get the grammar worked out in your head. I'll give you a tiny pause, and then I'm going to continue. That's why we call it the continuation rise. This is a really important thing, and I actually had somebody talking over a Facebook group saying that I don't believe it really exists, and then he just picked out a YouTube video. And in fact, it was pretty subtle. Sometimes it is not really, really noticeable. It's not extreme. It's not exaggerated. But it's there, and every native speaker waits for that to know when they need to pause and process the sentence before they move on. And I think that in Taiwan, people are mostly not aware of it. You don't put it in there, and that makes it harder for English native speakers to understand you.
Was this person that argued that it doesn't exist, was this also a native speaker?
A Taiwanese.
Okay.
Whose English is very good, and he obviously had a lot of confidence. And then he found some examples in a YouTube video. He says, well, I don't hear a continuation rise here. I go, yes, it's subtle, but it's absolutely there. Every native speaker will catch it. I
wonder if it wasn't a case of sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And
That's right.
Until
absolutely.
You were showing it, you're not aware.
That's right. And that's true of native speakers. But on the other hand, we are pretty aware of phrasing where we need to pause. The only extra information is when you pause, you've got that little rise, fall, and rise. So let's get to our article. Our title again is The Rise of Biometrics. Now, we've also already talked about what biometrics are. They're ways of identifying people by the use of things like fingerprints or retina scans or other properties of our bodies. And it is on the rise. That means we're starting to use them more and more often for more and more purposes.
You know what this is because you likely have a retina scan or a face scanner on your phone or a fingerprint scanner on the back of your phone. Let me plant my flag very clearly. I am not a fan of biometrics as a security measure, although I will say, used in conjunction with traditional security measures, biometrics are a nice second layer. But by no means would I ever suggest anybody use simply biometrics as a mean of securing their technology, especially important data that like your bank information or something like that. If that's on your phone, man, do not use a fingerprint scanner only.
People can steal your fingerprint data.
Very easily.
That's right. And I agree with you. I got a phone at a time when phones with these scanners and things were really popular and fingerprints and things like that. I purposely bought an earlier version of the phone that did not have these things. Now it says, do you want to add this? And I said, no.
No, thank you.
I just did not want to have that. So in addition, I have to say, Taiwan is a relatively safe place. So unless you're leaving your phone sitting around or putting it in your back pocket so someone can easily pick your pocket, in Taiwan, I think it's less, knock on wood, of a consideration.
I believe so as well.
Yeah, in the States, I might be more careful. Well, the States is another matter. Okay, our first paragraph. As technology becomes increasingly ingrained in our daily lives, new forms continue to emerge all the time. So from the very first sentence, you can see that this is a very dense article. We've got words with many syllables. Technology, increasingly, ingrained, emerge. All of these are kind of higher level words. You may need to look them up, if you don't know them already, or just look in the magazine. So this first part of the sentence actually is really common in Chinese. We're not allowed to speak any Chinese, but at the beginning of many Chinese articles, you will often see a phrase that says, with the development of technologies, of state-of-the-art technologies, blah, blah, blah. It's like the beginning of a whole slew of articles in Taiwan. So although the words are kind of difficult, it's something that you have seen many, many times in Chinese, and it's similar here. So technology, we probably know, increasingly more and more. Ingrained means that it has become really firmly settled. That means it's not something that appears and then disappears like a fad. It's something that is becoming part of ourselves and our lives. So ingrained in, it's like the grain in the wood. A piece of wood has lines in it. You can't easily take those lines out. It's ingrained in the wood. Our daily lives is easy. New forms, they're talking about new forms of technology. Continue to emerge. Emerge means to arise, to come out into the open all the time. So that, I think, takes care of the first sentence. Next one novel example that you may have heard about is biometrics. Now, the hardest word is biometrics, which we've already discussed. The other word to watch out for is novel. You probably know the word novel as a book that's made up. It's fiction. So in English, we don't say a fiction normally. We say a novel. This is a work of fiction. Fiction is not countable. Novel is countable. But here it does not mean a book to read for fun. Novel here simply means new, something that is new or innovative. So one new or innovative example that maybe you have heard about is biometrics, which you've already discussed. Okay, does that take care of the second sentence okay?
Yeah, I said novel is unique.
Unique. Okay, something that we didn't have before, though, so new. It means new in a number of European languages. This technology is defined as a means of identifying and authenticating a person using biological characteristics. So now they are defining what biometrics is. Now it has an S on it, but we say is because it is a technology. This technology is, and this is how we explain what biometrics is. So we find out if Chris is really Chris, the Chris who he says he is, or somebody else. We can find out if that person really is that person by using something that is a part of their body that they can't easily change. That's biological characteristics.
I like the two gerunds we have here, identifying and authenticating. So just as Karen said, Chris identified himself as Chris. Hi, I'm Chris Gorski. I'm from America, etc., etc. But now we need to authenticate that. We want to prove or show something is real. And this is where biometrics comes in. We can check our information that we have based upon what Chris says, and if those match up, they authenticate. These two words are close, but they are not the same. When we identify ourselves, we say who we are. When we authenticate, we prove that this is true.
Right. Or alternatively, maybe we have a bunch of fingerprints. We have no idea who they belong to. So let's identify who these belong to. Just a bunch of data where we don't know where it came from. We can put it into the computer database, and it will identify, oh, this is this person. It's not Chris. It's some other guy who stole that wallet. Okay? But authenticating is, I say I'm Chris. Do you believe me? Okay, well, here's my retina scan. That proves that I really am Chris. And I was sort of jumping the gun because we'll hear about retina scans in the next sentence. Common biometric types include fingerprint mapping, facial recognition, and retina scans.
Be careful. Fingerprint here is the adjective to mapping, so we won't say fingerprints mapping.
Watch that. A lot of people have trouble with that, not just Taiwanese, not just Chinese speakers. People all over the world, like from Finland and Belgium, they still get it wrong. So watch out for if there is an S or not. It's really important to native speakers of English, and it's really kind of hard, but that shouldn't prevent you from working on it. So we have some technologies mentioned here like fingerprint mapping. So the mapping means that they take some data and then they connect it to something else, mapping onto another fingerprint that you have to identify a person. That's mapping. Facial recognition means they get a scan of your face, and again, they match it to data in their database. And retina scans, That is really kind of amazing. They scan the back of your eyeball, and that apparently also has a very special pattern to it that if they have data on it already, they can match up the data that they have just collected with the data in their database. Okay, next sentence. Biometrics can be used to either authenticate a person's identity or identify individuals. And I think we've already discussed that. So either somebody, you have no idea who it is, you put it into the database, or you compare it with data in the database, you find out who it is, or somebody says, this is me, and then you prove that that is true. Biometric authentication involves comparing a person's data with their previously stored information. And we've already mentioned that several times. So information that they collected on a previous occasion or on previous occasions that is in the computer, and then they compare it with the new data coming in to make sure that, for example, this belongs to the same person. In contrast, biometric identification involves comparing a person's data to that of others in a database to determine their identity.
So this means that biometric authentication means we know who you are and we want to confirm it, but biometric identification means we don't know who you are, but we want to confirm anyways. And so for me, on my article, what I did was drew parentheses around these two terms to help kind of compartmentalize them and help me to understand them better, because this is a tricky article today. And if foreigners and native speakers are using these to help ourselves, probably English language learners would too.
Now, when we read an article, especially if it's kind of dense like this, a lot of us tend to skim. And if we are skimming here, I think that we probably would not really clearly distinguish between identification and authentication. If we're skimming, we probably won't think about it much.
It's so funny you bring that up, because as I was reading this for the first time several days ago, when I began reading this, I slowed down and said, stop. I caught myself.
Right.
And then I went through and read it extremely purposefully. Now, some people ask me why I can be a good speaker. Why do I sound confident when I speak? And one of the tricks is that I recognize right away that I am not understanding things as quickly as I want to. So mentally, I pull the gear down.
Right.
I slow down and I start reading with extreme purpose. And I had to do that for this article. I had to do this like I do when I'm speaking with people with limited capacity and I'm observing them.
Yeah.
I found myself saying, I am that student that doesn't understand right now. Slow down and understand this.
Which means the article is truly dense. And Chris described it beautifully, because that's exactly my experience as well. That's exactly what happened. I thought, they're repeating themselves. In fact, they are repeating themselves, but identifying and authenticating are two different things, and I had to go back and think it through. So a lot of times when we're skimming, this is a lesson for everybody. We are probably missing some crucial information.
Yeah, this is one of those articles where you want to put it in a lower gear,
right,
go a little slower, and use a little more effort.
That's right. If you think it's worth it. If you don't think it's worth it, you will probably just skim through it and then not have a clear idea of what you just read.
Let's go to our next paragraph. Biometrics can be classified into two categories: physiological measurements and behavioral measurements.
All right. So physiological measurements are things on your body that you really can't change, but behavior is something that in theory you could change. Very often we behave in the same ways in the same situations, but we could change it if we thought about it.
So recently, I have realized that the phrase classified into several categories has become very passé in most media senses. I keep hearing the phrase put into several buckets. I hear this phrase all the time now.
That's right. It's very
I don't
common.
recall hearing it 10 years ago, but it seems to be the new way. Put into several buckets is the new way of saying classified into several categories. All right, let's go to our next sentence. Physiological measurements can be further divided into two sets. So we have two sets and we're cutting them in half again. So now we got four. Morphological identifiers refer to physical characteristics unique to an individual and that are unlikely to change, including fingerprints and eyes. So morphological just means those things that won't change.
Physical.
Let's continue. For a biological analysis, DNA, blood, or urine, that's pee-pee, samples are used. And yeah, urine, that's probably the tricky word here. It just means when you go wee-wee, that liquid. Let's continue. Contrary to physiological measurements, behavioral measurements look at a person's actions, such as how they talk, walk, and even sign their name.
And that's pretty straightforward. So things that you do rather than things that are just on you or part of your body. While biometrics might seem like a new cutting-edge technology, it has actually been used for over 100 years. And the next sentence tells us how, around the turn of the 20th century, police forces in cities like London and Paris began using fingerprints to identify criminals. And I think we're all familiar with that. Law enforcement remains one of the most common fields where biometrics is employed. For example, fingerprints. This includes using advanced technology like automatic biometric identification systems that can find criminals based on photos. So if they just have a photograph of the criminal, they can get enough data to maybe identify them based on other information they've collected. Biometrics has also become widely used for immigration and border control. That's the first thing I think of. I haven't traveled for a long time, but especially going in and out of the U.S., going in and out of China, you're going to get a lot of that. Many airports now have passengers scan their faces and fingertips upon entry and exit. So if you go into a country, you leave a country, you're going to get scanned probably.
Have you done this with your Taiwanese data? Do you do the facial recognition and fingerprint, or do you wait in line and let them just do the stamp?
I wait in line.
Really? Yes. Here, give me the scan. Pow. I just get in that line and fly on through.
That's great.
Fast question for you. Can you tell a person is a foreigner? Let's say they're 100 paces ahead of you. Can you tell they're a foreigner by the way they walk?
Often, yes.
Yes, I can too. Isn't that an odd thing?
I know.
I never realized that until I was here. I was like, that guy's a foreigner. I just noticed it. We walk differently.
We're not looking at the skin color or hair or eyes or anything.
It's from the back. They're 100 paces ahead.
And they're
walking. It's just a foreigner. You just notice it.
And it's true of other nationalities as well. Like if they're from India or whatever, right. You can usually tell.
All right, our next paragraph. While advancements in biometrics can be helpful, there are still concerns, and I agree.
Yeah, they're still problematic.
Not all biometric tests are 100% accurate, and some facial recognition programs have been known to misidentify people of color more frequently.
And since race is probably the most sensitive thing there is in the U.S., you can see how much controversy that would cause, and it is not fair.
It's not, but these programs are often tested and built around white faces.
White people, males.
Therefore, males, that's right. And therefore, if you don't fit that particular type, you would be misidentified more often.
Yep.
Hopefully, as this technology further develops, it will be used in ways that prioritize beneficial applications for society.
Now, that is kind of a bland ending. It just means I hope people will not misuse these technologies, and I hope that they won't cause a lot of problems. We have a few questions for you. Number one, according to the passage, how does biometric authentication differ from biometric identification? And the answer is...
Letter D, biometric authentication compares a person's information to what they previously stored.
Very good. Number two.
Which two of the following are not morphological identifiers?
The answer is A, which refers to pictures 1 and 4. 1 is somebody writing, so handwriting is not a morphological identifier. And 4 is somebody's hairstyle. That's something that you can change. Question 3. According to the passage, in what way are airports using biometrics?
And the answer is C. Faces and fingertips are scanned to record who leaves or enters a country.
And finally, number 4.
Which aspect of biometrics is not discussed in the passage?
And the answer is D, costs of utilizing it. They didn't talk anything about that, and I'm sure all this stuff is very, very expensive. That's it for today. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.